we'll get it going. Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is Suzanne Fries out of the Institute for Community Inclusion. We're at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. And I'm with the State Employment Leadership Network. This is a project that's a partnership between the ICI, where I work, and the National Association of State Directors of Developmental Disability Services. We're thrilled to be with you today. We're hosting this event along with the Alabama Department of Mental Health, and we have a great slate of panelists for today's workshop. And I want to give a shout out to Byron White for his leadership in pulling everyone together and really spearheading this type of event for all of you around the state of Alabama. I'm going to take just a couple minutes to do a little orientation to our setting here for the next 2 hours, and then I will pass the baton to Terry, who is the director. And from there, we have a great set of panelists who have joined to provide a lot of really unique perspectives. But before we go too far down into the content, a couple of reminders. We're meeting together here in the Zoom platform, which allows you to both see and hear what folks are sharing. We would love to hear from you as the content is being shared. So as the different panelists are presenting their information, please take advantage of the chat space. If you don't see it on your screen right now, you can always activate the chat by going for that black bar. It's your menu or toolbar in Zoom. If it's not at the bottom of your screen, it might be at the top. And on that, you should see a list. In that list, you should see the word chat. And if you click on that, it will bring up the chat space. You can always activate and deactivate during the meeting if you want to see it or not. But it's a great idea to go ahead and list questions there for the panelists to come back to. All of you will remain muted during the course of the presentations, but toward the end we may have enough time, and if you're interested in unmuting and verbally dialoguing with the panelists, you're welcome to do so. We're slated to be together for 2 hours, and on this agenda you can see the different folks that are going to be sharing today. So we'll start with Alabama Division of DD Services, and Terry Pezent is here with us to share a perspective and really provide that sense of, from a regulatory perspective, expectations and what's permissible currently in your system. From there, we'll move to hearing from Tom Wilds and Genni Sasnett, who should be very familiar to most, if not all of you. And really, they're going to share a perspective of really what it takes to help support people outside of facilities and brick and mortar buildings and really become more of a presence within their communities. We're also thrilled today to have 3 organizations. We have 3 different ARC organizations from around Alabama to give their unique sense of how they are really making it happen. And it's a thrill to have Susan and Sarah and Gay with us today to each share what's going on in their neck of the woods. Tina's then going to round us out by sharing how VR is really present as a partner through all of the issues related to the pandemic, but also things that really haven't changed as far as what's available from VR, and give us a sense really of what they're seeing from current requests to voc rehab services. And then we hope to round it out with some time for QA with the panelists. Byron, I'll take a moment to ask if you'd like to add any additional comments to share with the group, and then we can move to Terry.
I am good. You did a great job. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And again, thanks, Byron, for spearheading all of this. Terry, if you would now unmute your line.
Okay, I think I already have, and just another shout out to Byron, and he has been incredible pulling these meetings together, and so really appreciate everything Byron has done to have this to coordinate this conversation, and also appreciate all of you who are participating. This is such a significant time to have a conversation around our path forward and what most people are calling our new normal. I also appreciate your patience with our division as we navigate these uncharted waters and this unprecedented time. We have had a lot of learning to do ourselves, and so your engagement throughout this process has been incredible and very I'm trying to think of the word, important to us as we've developed various tools and communications, and just really appreciate your support of the division during this time. Last week, because we know that we need to begin planning for transition, we emailed our providers a request to update their COVID-19 emergency plans to cover risk mitigation for those we serve and their staff. We also included in this guidance 2 assessments: an individual risk assessment to be completed by support coordinators and an employment assessment to be completed by a person designated during that individual risk assessment meeting, should employment be an interest for the individual, whether or not they are familiar with work and lost their job, or whether they wanted to experience work, would be new to work. We've had so many different stories come out of this COVID experience, and listening to different providers talk about how how people have really become more just seemed happier overall without having such a regimented day-to-day routine and more flexibility during the day to do the things that they want to do, and just the positive results of all that. And so we just felt like now is a good time to really, with these risk assessments, really delve into what other service opportunities are available that may not be as structured as traditional services have been in the past. You know, I can tell you story after story that we've heard where, you know, you have such a regimented routine, and people, you know, it's not always what people want to do. You want control over when you get up, when you go to bed, what you do during the day. And so this is just an excellent opportunity through this workshop, and I'm excited to hear your stories and your experiences of those of you who will be presenting as we have this conversation. And that's what it is. It is a conversation about a path forward, and one that includes really listening to people and having them identify the services that best meets what they see their day-to-day routine should be. And so appreciate all that you do. I want to note we do have the Appendix K. I didn't want to go into too much detail on that because I think the focus also needs to be on what happens when those waivers of requirements change. And that's a very possibility, a very probable possibility, because we know that the public health emergency period will end at some point. The K, our Appendix K is good through, I think, January the 26th. So now I think is the time to be planning for that transition, as we know and have learned lots of new things about people, or different things about people, and what they enjoy, not having to be in more regimented programs. And so all of that needs to be taken into consideration as we plan our path forward over the next few months. I'd also want to mention part of the vision of the division, and as a result of listening to families and individuals and providers during some stakeholder engagement meetings in the past year, we heard some of the same things that we're hearing now. Interestingly enough, people want something different. The families wanted something different and wanted it earlier instead of later. So with our new community waiver program that's on target for to roll out January the 4th, that is another opportunity to be thinking about how to serve people and transition some services. As we've identified, we've made a lot of progress identifying the pilot regions those services will be provided in. If you don't know what those are, just shoot us an email and we'll provide you with whatever details you need around the community waiver program. Tomorrow, I do want to note that tomorrow is the last day for public comment. So if you want to share your thoughts about those services within that program, please go to the Medicaid website and respond. The 1915C has those, you can find all the services there, and we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you, and it's important to hear from you as a stakeholder. So please don't let that pass you. Tomorrow is the deadline for that. I really, again, appreciate everybody's participation in this conversation, and look forward to the results of your work, and it's seeing what this transition looks like. And if the division can support you in any way, that's what we're here for. So please reach out to us or your regional office community service directors and let us know how you can help you and support you in your transition efforts, if that is whatever the path you choose, however that looks for your unique organization and your unique needs and the needs of those that you serve. So with that, I think I look forward to hearing the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Terry, thank you so much. It's wonderful to hear at the state level what's being considered and the amount of responsiveness that is really needed during this time of tremendous change to assure folks in the field that their feedback is really valued and that the state is ready to react as needed, especially as we're going into those uncharted waters. So thank you again for providing that state perspective. Terry, we're going to go ahead and mute your line, and we're going to transition to Tom and Genni, who are joining us from Southern Virginia, and we're thrilled to have you back and have you available to all of our partners in this work in Alabama.
Great. Glad to
there
be
you are.
Can you put up our first slide? Susan?
One more, I think, right?
I'm not sure. Are you working on putting up the slide?
Oh, can you not see that?
No.
Sheila, can you give me a heads up on what you're seeing? Right now I have the cover slide for Genni and Tom.
It looks fine to me.
We don't need, do we need to go to share screen or anything? We're not sharing our screen.
No, you should see, it's your cover slide that says supporting people outside of a facility, and it has your pictures with your phone number.
Well,
I wonder if it's just...
I've had to find a control that shared it. It's there now. Thank you.
Great.
Sure. Yep.
So it's Genni and Tom, and most of you have known us for the past 4 or 5 years. We've been working in Alabama as subject matter experts. For maybe a handful who don't know us, Genni was the COO and I was the CEO for an agency that served in 5 states. and we made the transition to totally community-based services beginning in the 1980s. So Byron has asked us to talk a little bit about supporting people outside of the facility. How do we do community engagement now? You want to flick to the next slide? There you go. So we thought we would begin with some basics of what are some resources that you could use, maybe if you're just beginning. You know, the virus kind of caught us all off guard, and many of the providers were all over the board in different stages of moving into the community. So what are some real basic resources that everyone can refer to? And if you do the next slide, in I guess 2017, the Department of Labor, the Office of Disability Employment Policy, put together a series of readings about the transition process. And with that came a webinar series. So for every chapter that you see here, leadership and setting the tone, strategic planning, making it happen, which is really the nuts and bolts, the operations of how to do the pilot, funding and so forth, is really your basic how-to of transitioning from center-based services to the community. So for those of you who have not pulled out of the train station yet, you can also use this for in-service training with your board and your other staff. Then, I guess a couple years later, I want to hit the next slide, they came out with a second manual. Can you move to the next slide? There you go. So for more advanced providers who were out into the community and some extra thoughts on fine-tuning their transition process, you have such topics as redesigning your organization. And I helped write that one. Genni wrote, well, Genni edited this whole series here. But it takes you to the next level of being in the community and revamping your organization to meet the needs of your participants out there. And a webinar series also went with that. Next slide. There you go. So where were most of us, or where we should have been before the virus took us all out of commission? You know, we were developing communication plans. We were telling our staff, our parents, our participants, the community, that we were moving our services into the community. We were building momentum. We were training staff, but not only training staff, we were changing our advertising, our recruitment, our orientation process to meet the new expectations for staff moving into the community. A lot of us were doing pilots of small groups matched with their interest and skill levels, using some tool that we may have already had, or what Genni and I have shared with most of you is a positive personal profile, looking at what skills people have. We were grouping people. We were doing a lot of community mapping. We were using all our constituencies, our parents, our staff, to identify the education, recreation, volunteer opportunities that could lead to employment. And we were documenting those, and we were vetting those. We were developing schedules for these groups to go out into the community. We were trying to figure out how they were going to go, what kinds of air traffic control systems did we need with identifying where our people are at different times of the day and how they're going to get there, and collecting data that could lead to decision making in all aspects of our transformation process, and evaluating that progress and adjusting when necessary. All the providers that we've been working with, and both of us over the last 4 or 5 years, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 different agencies we've worked with in Alabama. We're at all different levels of implementing this basic configuration for moving into the community. Next slide. You got it. So this is the graphic of where most of us were, to where our customers, our participants were coming from their home, their group homes, and they were coming to the facility. All of our staff were coming from home and meeting at the facility. We were getting vehicles, and then we were going back out into the community. And that was good, and that's moving towards the implementations of the setting rule and giving people opportunities in the community. But it also presented some challenges too, to where we were stretching our resources, that our vehicles were double duty, our staff were moving from their homes to the facility and back out and coming back to the facility to do record keeping. Our finances were stretched even more. So the virus now gives us a whole new way of looking at things. And here's Genni to talk about some next steps forward.
Next slide. So Tom said this is what many of us had managed to achieve, but then suddenly the world turned upside down, as all of you know. Not only we're taking a threefer, not only do we have COVID, which is unprecedented and like nothing any of us has ever seen, our economy is taking a whipping, and that's affecting all of you personally and in your businesses as well. And then that wasn't enough, so we thought we'd layer on some social unrest on top of that. So we are just at the max of stress, at the max of uncertainty, at the max of a lot of change, and all of those things are extraordinarily difficult to deal with. So next slide. The question then becomes, so what now? And my admonition to you is that we seize the moment. Sometimes during turmoil, people get afraid and they hunker down, and that's understandable. But sometimes during moments of change, people see opportunities, and Terry was really, I think, referring to a lot of this earlier in her remarks. They seize the opportunity and they make change that they wanted to make, but they were afraid to make, or they weren't quite poised to make, but suddenly something happens and opportunistically you move forward. Next slide. Okay. I hope you all appreciate my graphics. I worked very hard on them to keep them colorful to entertain you. So I think we may be at a moment where, rather than, remember the early illustration that Tom showed you, where we had a facility in the center and all of our resources were harbored there, our staff came there, our individuals came there, we all went out, we all came back. But we may be, and actually some of you, and I hope you'll speak up and talk about it, some of you that I've been talking to have suddenly flipped the switch. You have moved more expeditiously than you even anticipated doing towards the community. And what I mean by that is, because we had so many, well, we had virtually everyone at home, suddenly we were in a different position. People weren't able to go out to day program, in many cases not able to go out to work anymore. But what I see happening and what I hope we will build upon is that people have started going out into the community, completely bypassing ever going to that facility. The great news is that you have things that can facilitate that. And you have things like your community experience option. You have things like your community day hab option. You have things that can help facilitate making that direct path into the community. So for example, if someone, say they were living in a group home or even supported living in their own apartment, and that individual wanted to go out in the community, had things they wanted to do, those things were available and could be accessed safely, that individual could go out into the community, again, either probably under your community experience or some other category of your waiver. That person is just going then straight from home into the community with their staff, and they're coming back home. And that's very much like what you do and we all do. That's called normal life. And you know, there are many permutations of how that might transpire. You may have folks who happen to live together, who have some common interests that maybe could go out together. And this is, again, probably already happening. It's something that we could formalize a bit more. It may be that some people live in close proximity to one another, who have some common interests, that if folks had to have a grouping of more than one-on-one, that those individuals could get together either virtually or in socially distanced appropriately, and talk with their staff about creating some kind of schedule for things that they would like to do in the community. So, you know, often when Tom and I do training on transition to the community, we talk a lot about how in our agency, we had to create meetup because we had no facilities. We created meetup places in the community. So say 3 individuals might be in a group and they might meet up at a church or something, meet up with their staff and go out for the day and then come back to that place as the meetup location from which to go home. That can, or I think what we're trying to express is that even that can be bypassed at this point, if we can figure out how to get more directly to people's homes and get them more directly into the community, brushing away all of the complexity that goes with going to the facility or meeting up someplace specifically in the community. And I know that, you know, those people who are already doing this probably have a lot they can add to this conversation, things that they've already figured out, things that have been working for them, complexities that have come up. But I will tell you, and Terry, I will echo what you had to say in terms of what we're hearing nationally. And what we are hearing is that people are kind of saying, the individuals that we support, not 100%, but many, are sort of saying, you know, I don't have to go to school. It's sort of like going to school your whole life and you never get out of school, you know. And we all longed for that day we would graduate from whatever institution we were matriculating at. But if that day was never going to come, I imagine we would have gotten rather impatient with that. Genni Sasnett would have, let me speak for myself. So I guess the most important thing I'm trying to communicate is, you know, it's scary sometimes to jump off the bridge, but you've got a bit of a net under you right now. And that net is the circumstances in which we find ourselves. That net is the support you're getting from DMH. That net is DMH's ability to work out waiver services that will accommodate this brave new world that we're stepping into rather unexpectedly. So be bold, I guess, is my biggest message to you. I will tell you in our agency, and I'll give Tom a lot of credit for this, we were very opportunistic as an agency. So we had a plan, and you know, it was a very elaborate plan, very finely tuned. But by golly, if suddenly an opportunity came up, a door cracked this wide, we were through that sucker in a minute, because that's really what you have to do. You have to be aggressive and opportunistic, safe, wise, but opportunistic. Next slide, please. So, obviously there's some things one has to think about, when one is moving forward, particularly in these circumstances that we are facing. And it's my understanding that, you have gotten guidance from DMH. You do have these risk assessments and other things that you're doing to try to look at people very individually and make sure, that we're keeping everybody safe and secure. That, of course, is first and foremost. But some things to, be thinking about, and some of these I've mentioned. But the first is, what funding category is this person in? Is it if you're looking at someone in their home or they're home with their families and they're willing to go, and the family is willing to support them to go out, are they in the appropriate funding category? Or could you work with support coordination to get that person shifted over to that appropriate category? I'm hearing of cooperation that is occurring in this regard, and I think that that's a great thing. It is going to be absolutely imperative that support coordination and the providers be on the absolute same page. There can be no daylight in between what support coordination is thinking and what providers are thinking. So, whatever can be done to support that collaboration, we need to do that. Transportation is going to challenge you. It challenges you in the best of times. So we're going to have to get creative. There's issues of how we space people in vehicles. There's issues of, can we use public transportation? And if so, how can we use that safely? Are we going to need to dip into, because frankly, we likely are going to need additional transportation if in fact we're going to be in the community more and serving people in smaller staff to individual ratios. We may need more access to transportation. So does that mean we suddenly start looking at the possibility of using staff vehicles? That's a very complex issue. There's a lot of liability and insurance issues associated with that. But so I'm not telling you to go out and do that, but what I am saying is it will be time to examine what you have available in terms of transportation and be very creative with it. One thing we did, for example, is we got rid of all of our 15 passenger vans. We got sedans, we got minivans, smaller vehicles that would make things more accessible, and they're more normalizing. And by the way, safer. 15 passenger vans can be dicey. We need to make sure though, if in this next 6 weeks, assuming that things indeed won't open up August 1, and we're going to take advantage of making some of these moves, you can't mess around. We're going to have to get going like ASAP. And one of the questions is, are our staff ready? And if our staff aren't ready and we can't yet bring them in, there are remote training availability. Just like you're sitting here with us right now, you could be sitting here with your staff if you make sure that they all have access. Getting that training done with them, getting them ready. You can begin to look at grouping. You may not have to group. Maybe you have some funding that's one-on-one, and that's awesome and hallelujah. But most people are not funded at one-on-one. And so sometimes we inevitably are going to have to look at grouping. What will work? What will work? I mentioned some things before. Do people live in close proximity to each other? Do people live together? And one thing I would encourage you to think about, what staff live near what individuals? And the reason I mention that is when we're talking about going out into the community, sometimes I think we forget we're supposed to be in the person's community. That's what it's about, not in a community across town. And the staff person who lives in that same community knows that community best. He or she has the best possibility of making inroads in that community because they are a member of it. Community mapping, which we preach, till we're blue in the face, which is the process for identifying activities in the community, is going to be, I suspect, a little more challenging in the COVID era. For all of the obvious reasons. Often we have people volunteering. Are those volunteer places going to be open? Do they have new sets of rules? And on and on and on, that is going to become more complex. On the flip side of that, we have more nonprofits springing up all over the place to support people who are suffering during this crisis. More food banks, more opportunities like that, more thrift stores that are making clothing available to people who are unemployed, et cetera. So we have opportunities. But we have to be thoughtful about how we're approaching them. That community receptivity, we're not sure. We're all kind of wondering how that's going to go. So we need, I think, on our end to be prepared to make some assurances. This is what we do to keep folks safe. This is what we would do to keep other people around folks safe. Because there inevitably will be some questions, and we need to have the answers for ourselves as well as those with whom we're interacting with in the community. And then there are all the questions around work. Are people returning to work? If they are returning to work, are they really returning to the same job, or has everything transformed so much during this year that in fact it's almost like a new job? And so Tina, they're going to have to open up a new case just to get some support in there to get the person reacclimated to the new norms in that workplace, the new social and health oriented mores that have been established. Next slide, please. So the question really becomes, and I think you will get some guidance, and have gotten guidance from the state and will continue to, but we really have to be thinking right now deeply, and I know that you have been, how we are going to maintain health and safety, and understand the myriad requirements that are going to come, at us in order to make that possible. For individuals, obviously, spacing is an issue. So one thought, and Tom and I were discussing this yesterday, if you are able to move a substantial amount of your folks directly in the community, skipping over coming to the facility, and yet you have other individuals who inevitably are going to come to the facility, suddenly you have opened a lot of additional space in your facility, because you have fewer people coming there all day, which would help you in terms of maintaining your proper spacing. You've got to think about individuals in PPE and their tolerance for that. Something that could be, and I pray is being done right now, is if people are at home, they are being acclimated to some PPE, that they are being acclimated to masks, and understanding the importance of social distancing and those other things that we need to do. We've got to be thinking about how to keep the places that we have individuals in contact with clean and safe and sanitized. We've got to decide, are we going to do things like temperature measurement with our individuals? The state may be giving you guidance on that. You've got to be thinking about, you probably have some particularly immunocompromised people. How are you going to protect them? Are there additional layers of protection those folks are going to require? The same thing may be true of people who have some behavioral challenges. How well are they going to tolerate all of this change, PPE, and all of the various other things that are going on? And then of course you have transportation considerations. Once you figure out what the transportation is, how are we going to space people within that transportation? What limitations does that put on us? What complexities does that add in terms of sanitation and all of those other things? For the staff, as I mentioned, there's got to be training not just on how to more expeditiously get to the community, but how to handle all of the things associated with health and safety and COVID-19. We cannot take for granted that the staff know exactly what to do. How are we going to keep them spaced from each other and from individuals so that they can do things safely? Do we have the PPE? And we asked this question the other day, and it wasn't a resounding response of I've got enough for the next year. So that worried us a little bit. Got to be thinking of how to stockpile that stuff. And what are we going to do to keep the staff workspaces sanitary and safe for them? Are we going to measure their temperature? And if we have some staff who are immunocompromised, of which we inevitably do, what are we going to do to support those individuals? So a lot to think about. Next slide. So I'm going to credit Tom with this. I think he just wanted a picture of himself on a horse to be shown. But at any rate, the bottom line is this. Sometimes when you fall off that horse, you just have to get back in the saddle as soon as possible. But sometimes when you fall off that horse, a whole new horse is going to come along and you're going to have to get into that new saddle. And I think what we're going to find ourselves doing is we're going to be saddling up with that new horse, but we've got the lead for the old horse, and that old horse is coming along with us too. It's a complicated time. It is a complex time. In some ways, it can be an exciting time if it gives us that impetus to move forward more aggressively than we anticipated, but always with safety and the health of your individuals, your staff, and your communities foremost in your mind. So with that, I will close wishing you good luck, and also just tell you how delighted I am that providers are going to be speaking next. And there are some providers I know who are attending today who are doing some awesome things. So when we get to the open discussion part, I'm expecting you guys to speak up. So thank you.
Genni and Tom, thank you so much. Hearing that it can be done even though we're in a time of uncharted water is very reassuring and a great perspective to lead us now into some stories from within Alabama. Susan, can you unmute your line?
It is unmuted.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Great to have you join us from the Arc of Madison County.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. I'm excited to share a few things from our program. We were one of the first ODAP pilot programs in Alabama, along with Sarah in the Arc of Jackson County. And from this program, we learned a lot. Next slide. One of the reasons why we became part of the pilot, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our transformation before and a little bit about COVID and our transformation now, but why did we seek to change back then? Well, we had heard that these new CMS guidelines were coming to and dictating changes in service delivery, that it was going to be more community-based services. So we wanted to be ahead of the game. If you know anything about me, I always want to be ahead of the game. And I'm a planner. So it was an exciting time for me to start looking at how we could change our program. And one of the things that we knew was that we had heard workshops were going away. We had a very large workshop, I'll be very frank with you, I was one of the people who was very much against the elimination of workshops. But I knew it was coming and I knew I had to do something different. So what was that going to look like and what was that going to be? We wanted to be an innovative program. We don't like to be a stagnant program. My staff will tell you I'm always looking at change, and it was the right thing to do for people with disabilities. Next slide. Some of the challenges we faced, and I hear so many programs go, oh, my program can't do that because of this or that. Well, the average age of the people that we had, especially in our workshop, was between 50 and 55 years of age. Think about putting a person in their first job at 50 to 55, and also that person has never had any kind of exposure to jobs, and this would be the first job that they had ever had. So we were working with 19 different residential providers, and less than 60% of the people we served lived at home with families. So we had a lot of different programs that we were juggling, and when we first started out, everything was still day hab and residential. And it was a lot of resistance to change, resistance to thinking outside of the box, resistance to, even though these waiver services were out there, to looking at different types of waiver services. So there was a lot of groundwork that we had to do. Next slide. I'm going to go very quickly through this. You know, and these are some of the things that Genni shared with us that we needed to do, the town hall meetings, the job descriptions. You know, one of the things, and I know it's hard sometimes with the board, especially when you've got a lot of parents on the board, but every single time we had a really great success, we would have 15 minutes at the next board meeting to share with them to get that board on board with what we were doing. Also reading new trends and services, what CMS was expecting. Always you need to have goals and outcomes, and you know, employment plans, and making sure that everybody had job coach training. That was part of our workshop. Next slide. And I will tell you, when we started looking at workshop and changing the workshop, I was so resistant that I was going to reintegrate the workshop. I was bringing in people without disabilities. I was digging in hard on that workshop part. But Genni talked a little bit about how, you know, changes can, small changes can open up big doors. Well, we had a very, very lucrative contract with a gun manufacturer. And we were doing all their boxes from, it had come in from New York, from other places. And it was very hard to see getting out of that line of work. Well, they went on a 2-week furlough. That 2 weeks turned into a month, then a month and a half. And we were like, okay, now's the time to change. So we started really working towards, while we had worked more towards independent employment, there were some people who needed a lot more support. So we started providing a lot of options for small group employment. And before the coronavirus, we might have had 45 people doing different types of jobs out in the community in small group employment. So we ended up where we were so successful that everybody was out of the building. You know, the change, it just was like a match was lit and set fire. And the one thing that I will say is staff at first was a little more resistant, but if you go into this where you don't get your staff involved, you're not going to be successful. When we started getting them into the planning process and they started coming up with ideas, it was like the more excited, the engaged they became, the more excited they became. They were coming with new ideas all the time. Also, you know, we had many people that didn't want to leave the building, but peer pressure from friends who had gone to do this or gone to do that when they came back made other people go, I want to try that. I want to do that. And one of the things I started planning for a long time ago was just more transportation. I knew the more we got out of the facilities, the more that we would need different types of transportation. So we started working on minivans and, as you said, cars, small types of vehicles for the smaller groups to go out in the community. And thinking outside the box was one of the most important things to talk to. I will never forget one of my staff who, she saw this bed and breakfast for sale, and she called me, and it was like 8 o'clock at night, and she's like, Susan, we need to start a bed and breakfast. You know, just getting that excitement out there and them thinking not just dayhab and residential, but what else is out there for the people we serve. Next slide. Successes, we have a building, our old workshop's up for sale. We have another building that we will probably either repurpose or sell within the next few months. There's so many people that have gotten employment. You would not imagine the volunteer opportunities that we've been able to find in our community. And United Way helped facilitate a lot of those opportunities. There's a volunteer center in almost every area of the state. And to be able to go through them was a one-stop shop that has been really wonderful for us. When somebody says they're not interested, or they say, oh, I don't want to volunteer, I don't want to go to this place, make sure, I don't want a job. You know, a lot of our people have never been informed or educated on what that means. So the more we started doing tours, taking people out, the more they started thinking for themselves and, yeah, I want to do this, I want to do that. But you got to make sure that you're not just listening to the no, that you're trying to really work with people and make sure that they know what this means. Inclusion should not be an outing, but meaningful, and focus on natural supports. Even now, Who did you talk with out in the community? What kind of connection did you make? And I make every staff member that goes out and give me some kind of information on how they were involved in the community, that they just didn't go on an outing. Person-centered planning is going to be so critical, especially in the coronavirus time. And if we didn't move forward because of a roadblock, we would have not made our transition. Sometimes you get hit down, you got to get back up. Next slide. Try something different. How has the COVID changed our programs? We are getting to the point to where I'm thinking no facilities. I'm really looking at how I can keep people out in the community. You know, we had not taken that extra step. My staff was a little more, we got all these different residential facilities coming in. We can't do that. You know, yeah, we can, and they're seeing it. We're doing smaller group settings right now in COVID. We're trying to take residential homes and keep those individuals together so we don't cross-contaminate the same staff with the same individuals, same vehicles. And, you know, we're trying to, you know, really look at mitigating risk factors. You know, I have an on-site shredding business. You know, we've got people, you can't distance 6 feet. So we've done plexiglass in between. Every vehicle is assigned a bag with PPE, so you're not taking a different vehicle, a different bag on a different vehicle. And in the bag, you have wipes, sprays, every type of PPE imaginable, mask. We have thermometers. We take temperatures before anybody gets on the vehicle. The staff has to take their temperature. We do a checklist with parents every day of have they come in contact, the checklist that you go through. Staff does the checklist when they sign in. We worked, you know, we have ordered, and I'm waiting on it, one of those police sanitizers for each vehicle. Any way that I can think to mitigate risk factors. You know, last thing I want to do is expose my staff or expose people we serve. So my job throughout all this has been PPE. You know, I've become a purchasing agent. Next slide. Along with my purchasing agents, I'm out there trying to find these things. Some of our new services, we are not waiting till to provide services. We've already started providing services. We are working on virtual day hab. We've started some of it. We have done, you know, to not go out and buy everybody iPads. We have started with Amazon Fires, the real inexpensive kind, and got cases. And we're waiting on the case managers to do their assessments, and we are ready with Zoom applied to get those out to the individuals. We've already come up with our what we're going to be, the kind of classes that we're going to be doing. But there's some people we know we may not even get paid for in the future, but that doesn't mean they can't watch a Zoom class and be involved. Community activities, before and after, you know, we were doing a lot of senior citizen classes, going and doing art classes. We had moved so much out into the community. Now some of the ideas that we're doing, we're not doing as much of those. We're doing a lot of volunteering still. We're doing Meals on Wheels, but we're doing picnics. We are scavenger hunts, cornhole and ring toss, hiking, playing basketball, going to the park, drive-by parades. We're doing virtual therapy with my early intervention program, and they're delivering therapy type packets out to the children where they may not have these items in the home that PTOT and speech thinks that might be needed. So it's just really, one of our staff members has a drone, and you know, he's going to be working with people going out, showing them how to use a drone. You know, it's just trying to be as creative as possible. We have a lot of people still working. I have over 20 still in small group employment. You know, we are, when we first started it, you know, it's picking up, it's the temperature taken, we X off seats, it's a cleaning and signing before the person gets on the vehicle, it's a cleaning and signing afterwards for the staff. We did releases from our lawyer for everybody to sign, understanding that COVID-19 can be picked up anywhere. So, you know, COVID-19 doesn't mean that you just have to sit in your house all the time. You just have to be real careful. We do videos for training for every single person that comes back into the program, as well as the staff from our nurse And, you know, we are really working with people to try to say, you know, especially family members, on getting the individual to wear a mask. And next slide. And, you know, what I would say is what we're looking at in the future is not going to be perfect. There's some people who may not come back to our program, but in every way possible, I think as programs, we just have to look at each person individually. There's going to be a lot of person centered planning going with this, but how can we best serve that person based upon where we are right now? Thank you.
Susan, thank you so much for bringing such a positive attitude and examples for everybody to learn from. I think that's a major part of the game these days, is getting up each day and trying to find a new way to approach old problems and some new problems, and having that positive attitude is so important. We're going to switch now to the ARC of Jackson County. We're welcoming Sarah Haynes. Sarah, do you want to go ahead and unmute?
Yes, I'm unmuted. It's good to be
Welcome,
with
Sarah.
you. Yes. It's good to be with you. I'll start with the first slide. The next slide. First, I'll tell you a little bit about where we are. We currently provide support employment, community experience, habilitation in the community, and personal care services. We've been providing supported employment services since 1988. We currently support 121 people working in our community. Our department has been extremely supportive in our transformation, and working with Genni Sasnett, our mentor with ODAP, has helped us to close our sheltered workshop and develop a lot of these new services in our community. And I wanted to share with you a few of our successes and what has helped us to find our path forward. Next slide. Next slide. In supported employment, this is shows how valued the employees are. No doubt in these uncertain times, there's one thing for certain: the employees that we support are valued. During a time when many have been unable to work due to limited transportation, their employees did not hesitate to hold their jobs. And when decisions had to be made on who would and wouldn't be called back, the people we serve under our waiver were retained at 100%. We're very proud of that. And that to us is proof that they are contributing valuable employees. Supporting employment has been a service we've been able to safely provide and bill for during this pandemic. And this has been financially beneficial to our agency and possibly could be beneficial for your agency as well. Next slide. Here is William Sampley. He's a success story for us. When we began serving him, he was living in a group home. Through our support employment program, he found a full-time job with benefits. He's now been employed at HTPG for 17 years. When that happened, we were able to help him move into an apartment with us providing personal care. He was then able to buy his own home and has now paid off his home. We continued to support him at home and on his job. He's only missed 2 days during the pandemic. William also he has an intellectual disability and also is deaf. Next slide. Scott Duncan. Scott works at NCI, and this is him receiving his 20-year award. And Scott has been out of work some due to COVID, but he will be going back. Next slide. This is Harold Powell. He works at JCPenney's, and this is him getting recognized for 10 years of employment. Next slide. Quentin Ball. Quentin Ball has been an employee of Sano since 2010, and he was chosen several times by supervisors as Employee of the Month. But in 2018, all of his peers, everyone in the plant voted for Employee of the Year, and Quentin was chosen. Next slide. We also, as a result of our transformation, we developed a small work group, and it's at Sano America. We started that in 2016 as we closed our workshop. And in 2017, they were chosen as Supplier of the Year. They produced 1.7 million parts with no deficits. So that was done as we were closing our sheltered workshop. We had developed options for people to be able to choose from, and through person-centered planning, we helped everyone to find their place where they felt, that they were making progress. So that's the small work group. Next slide. Shane Lewis, he's come a long way. When Shane began receiving services, he came to our sheltered workshop. His family was so protective that his mother came with him, and she kept coming with him for quite some time. But then finally, they were comfortable enough for him to be there by himself. He was successful at the sheltered workshop, but then when we were closing, we were offering, we were trying to find options, and through much thought for his entire family, they decided that Shane could try that. So Shane also has an intellectual disability, and he is blind. So, but the family supported him, and he now goes every day and loves it. He doesn't want to miss. He's been just a really good success story for us. Okay, next slide. Community experience is something we developed at the same time as we were closing our sheltered workshop. And we have developed 12 sites where we do volunteer work. We have one site that is the Lions Club. I know everyone knows probably Lions Club donates glasses. Well, we happen to be in the city where unclaimed baggage is, and they give hundreds of thousands of glasses a year to the Lions Club, but they have to be sorted into what is prescription and what is not, and what is designer and what is not. So the volunteers there are doing all that sorting and cleaning and packaging of glasses. They started off doing 1,500, they started off at 500 per day, and now they're up to 1,500 per day. They were recognized in the Lions Club International magazine. Next slide. Highlands Medical Center is another volunteer site, and what we were wanting to do with that, we wanted to join a group that was very organized and established before we got there. So we applied for a grant, and what we did was we brought the hospital and our local newspaper on board with us, and we had systematically one person at the time would go in and become acclimated and comfortable before we brought someone else in. And as each person came in, our local newspaper would do a feature article on them and talk about, the things they were doing and the accomplishments they were making. So that turned out really well. Next slide. Habilitation in the community, that's something we started. And we began development of that in June of 19 and implemented it last October. And what we did, it's different from community experience, of course. We met with everyone, we changed objectives so that the objectives they had could be accomplished in the community in integrated settings. For example, the laundromat for developing independent living skills, a salon to include self-care skills. And then for exercise, those places are endless, gyms and walking tracks, and also like going into sporting goods stores to find out what equipment you might need to work out. So we've been able to accomplish that a lot with that, and we call it mobile learning. Next slide. So our future. Our next step is creating virtual services in the community, and we have been working on that. Susan has shared some things with us, and for people who during this next month we can provide virtual service in the home. So we're utilizing iPads and hotspots and all that, so we can provide that. And then we're also, our plan is doing small groups of 3. We can social distance 3 people on our buses. And so utilizing that and vans and cars, we hope to be able to provide services for the rest of our people in that way. And like Susan, it looks like our plan is to be in the community and out of here. We have also leased one of our buildings, and probably we'll be seeing what might happen with this building. But there's a quote there at the end that there's always a better way to do it, find it. And we're trying to find the better way to do it. I think that all things work together for good. And I think this is going to be a really positive step for us. It's a little bit chaotic trying to pull it all together, and I know it is for everyone out there, but it is coming together, and I think it's going to be better in the long run. So thank you very much.
Sarah, those were wonderful stories and examples, and I think there's, in the work that we do, nothing more powerful than seeing everyone's faces and hearing the descriptions of taking those incremental steps. And thank you for recognizing too that you, along with your colleagues and all of the staff and in your organization, take on that chaos on a day-to-day basis in order to help people live more fulfilling lives. And I think it's really important to have something like this quote from Thomas Edison in front of you all, and knowing that that's driving you toward those better outcomes, but also recognizing how to show grace and be supportive to each other is really important. So thanks for being with us today. Okay, so we're going to bring up the arc of Clark County. My apologies, I should have had a map on the screen in case anyone's not familiar with where everyone's located. But Gay, will you join us? Are you unmuted?
I think I unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay.
Great. Are you going to be on camera? I'm not sure if we're seeing you yet.
I'm on it on the other, like when I go to the right, but you're still at the top.
There you go. You're good. Okay, great. Thanks. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for giving the Arc of Clark County the opportunity to do this today. Rosa Jackson is our executive director, and she allowed me to be able to present this today. But she's been with the organization 30 plus years and has really done a lot to drive this, as well as Terry Pazette from years ago has done the same. And so I'm honored to get to bring y'all some information. I want to tell you what I'm trying to do here today is maybe just talk to those that haven't yet stepped out yet and are looking to see how do you do it, especially if you're rural, because that does have some challenges in itself. So the first thing I want to say is go to the next slide. Get over yourself. I know that's hard to look at and you're wondering, what does she mean, get over myself? Through the years, I think we've gotten so accustomed to being everything for the person supported rather than letting them find other avenues of support through natural support, community. And we've done that for years, and we got really good at it. And it's really hard to let go of those things that we're used to doing. But the first step is going to be getting over ourselves. Next slide. When you're looking at the information here, it says, now this is not the end. It's not the beginning of the end, but it is the end of the beginning. And what that means is when you go into look into these kind of services, we are looking at doing something that starts something totally new, something that we didn't think of before. And I think for those agencies that haven't stepped out yet, now is the time. While people have not been at the center, while they've had an opportunity to see what that routine break is like, they may, have even found some things that they're interested in through this time that could be worked on later. Tom Wilds, I cannot thank him enough for what he's done for our agency. If I had a picture of him earlier, I would have put it here. He's been working with us for several years now, and I cannot explain the way he's been able to guide us into that mindset. And it is a mindset. You hear a lot of bickering and complaining about, how can we do this? We can't do that. Rural areas, how do you get there? Well, I started thinking about it, and today I wanted to kind of look at what we are. What is our role? I keep talking about getting over ourselves. Well, that's what we've got to do to provide the services that are needed. And so I thought about a pair of crutches. Next slide. I know you think, why are you thinking that? Well, on the next slide, it shows a pair of crutches, but it talks about what kind of crutches are we? Because a lot of times crutches are used to help people. They're supposed to be used to get people better out on their own. They're supportive for a while, and then they let people get better and on their own. The kind of crutch I'm afraid that a lot of us were for years were the crutch that makes the person feel like they are dependent on the security of it forever. So making the decision to be a supportive crutch and not a crippling crutch is our first step in understanding that we want to move the person forward beyond us. Next slide. We do it through 4 stages we're currently going through. We're a planning place. We like to know what we're doing and set our sights and get ahead. I did these 4 phases on here in the form of crutches to make sense with my theme. But our 4 phases are renewing your crutches, changing how your crutches work, moving your crutches, and letting others crutch or get rid of them altogether. Next slide. I want to show our phases that we've been going through. Phase 1 of this is creating a phase that will work for your agency. And if you don't motivate your staff, it's over. They've got to have buy-in to this. They've got to feel like this is something that is beneficial to them and the person supported. We are doing training for that whole year of this phase. The first phase, we started training every month. For the entire year, you do a full agency training every month where you're getting the staff together, you're talking about where we're headed, what we're doing, you're letting them be a part of it, letting them come up with ideas and things to work on. If they, understand, what it means to support the person, then staff will make those changes. The first phase, what we did is we had 2 groups. It was a group of guys we had, a group of ladies we had, that we went ahead and just said, we're going to put these people out in the community with community experience and let everyone else see. Because, as always, in the beginning, you had a lot of naysayers, a lot of people going, oh, this can't happen, you can't make this work, and so what we had to do is go ahead and put some people out there so you can go ahead and annihilate the naysayers and go, hey, it's working, it's successful. And they saw that then. You have to get 2 staff to do that are going to make it successful, that have been trained well. That is very, very important in this. Next slide. Our phase 2, we made our groups smaller. That's the next phase that we needed to go into, to fit the community day guidelines to 2 to 3 in a group, depending on their level. This, all of a sudden people start going, oh my God, that's more staff, that's more people. Oh my gosh, that's our budget. And yes, it is. It is more staff. It does take some of your budget. But look, if you're going to do something, you know, you have to do, change comes risk. And I know we all have to have money to survive in these agencies, and that's true. But you have to ask yourself, what is your agency's philosophy? If you're wanting to head forward and you're wanting to do the things that we're talking about today and making that happen, then you've got to be willing to step out on faith, and you've got to be willing to make those risks to make it happen. The staff, what happened here was they actually got excited about having less people in their group, and made them realize being out in the community could happen because they're not having 4 or 5 folks with them. And I put on here some of the crusty crutches even cleaned themselves up and were ready to support in a different way. So next slide. Our phase 3 that we had talked about doing, we were supposed to start on April 1st. And on April 1st, we were going to start a new connection center in our Thomasville, Alabama, the city of Thomasville. Our center is in Jackson. Thomasville's on the other end of our county. We did not want it to be another center. We wanted it to be a connection center for the community to have things there and to do things, because in rural areas, it is tough to find things sometimes for everybody to be involved in. And this allowed for an area for us to do things in that community. But it gave a little drop-off spot for those that needed it to begin with, because in rural areas, it's a little harder when making transportation happen. But that, of course, was put on the back burner for a minute through COVID now. But we plan on getting that up and going as soon as this is all over. It is important in this phase that you do get out of the center, find another meeting spot, like Genni was talking about, meeting at a church, doing stuff, you know, maybe not even have a meeting spot if you can do without it. But of course, in rural settings, sometimes you have to meet to bring them to town, you know, so that may be something that we have to do, but we need to make it happen. And, you know, understanding that a community connector, those are like awesome. We decided to get a community connector that could get involved. Of course, bless her heart, she hadn't got to get a lot done through COVID, but she is definitely going to be beating some bushes and making some connections happen. One thing that's important is to make sure you're doing what the person supported wants to do. We have a little assessment that they fill out, that we talk to them to see what things they're interested in, what things they like. And then the community connector takes that information and tries to find things for them out in the community. And we have boards at different places where the community connector puts those activities, events going on, different things happening she finds. And groups can, you know, walk by the board. If they see something they like, they grab it off the board, it's theirs. And that helps too, be able to have somebody that's out helping on the side, as well as the group themselves advocating for somewhere to go and something to do. So the 4th phase, next slide, after you have gotten your group smaller and you've, you know, removed them from being at the center at that site meeting, begin adding a group a quarter that will be full community inclusive, that will be out there every day until everyone's doing it. That's our next stage in things, and understanding there are going to be some that have issues with it at first that you have to work with, but we want to still get those people out as much as possible until we get full integration of everyone in the community. The next slide is, now we want to know what we as crutches, what will we be doing now? We're going to be getting involved in every community event out there. I listed lots of things. Y'all know what they are. In rural settings, it can become a little more difficult finding events going on, things happening, but it is possible. We have had so many people, once we educate the community and get them past thinking we're supposed to be segregated at the center, and they realize that we want to be part of the community, we have had great success between different churches, between the animal shelters, the schools, the daycares, and volunteering at different sites, food banks. We have done a lot of connecting. And we'll go on to the next slide. All of that is supposed to lead us to employment. That's what the real goal is here, is making it to where they can find employment and aren't just volunteering or just sitting out in the community all day. When we decide to be the crutch of support, then they can get involved in things, and this leads to jobs. A lot of jobs happen because who you know. If you think about your own life, a lot of jobs you received were because of who you knew. Well, that's the same thing. How do they get to know people? This first phase, getting them out in the community. Yeah, it's hard to get employment for people when they're at the center all day, but it's a lot easier when they're making connections, meeting people, volunteering at places. Then it's easier to make those connections because they know the person. They want them to be a part of what they're doing. So on the next slide, it talks. I went a little bit over to COVID-19 to talk about how to still connect during this time. And Susan and they were talking about things that I consider indirect volunteering, which is important to do right now. It may be that you call the animal shelter and you say, hey, I'm wanting to keep up in touch with y'all. That is so important. If you had connections with them before COVID, please don't lose those connections right now. Call them, talk to them, see what they're still needing. If they say, oh, well, we're really short on dog food right now. Well, that person can then go on Facebook, go somewhere and ask that people drop off at a certain location dog food that we can then support them to take to the shelter and leave at the door. People are still not letting you in some places or allowing groups to come in or different things. That's fine. That's all right. Do indirect volunteering, but stay connected with the people that you have contacts with. Don't lose that connection during this time because you're going to need them more than ever when we get back to doing things. Doing gardens, that's something you can do and put out on a table by the road for the community. Things that you can be doing just to stay active and with people. That's so important right now. And especially in rural areas, you need things to do. The next slide, it talks about how to connect with those that are at home and not receiving those services from us before, since the COVID. Well, we got to do things to reach out to them. Facebook Live. For those, especially in rural areas, we do not have internet everywhere. There are places on earth that you can't get internet. And some of our folks live there. So what we are trying to do now in order to handle that issue, they do have DVD players. So everything we're putting on Facebook Live and the discussions and the different things, we're all doing videos. I'm doing a lot of health-related videos and everybody else doing videos. We're going to make DVDs and send out the 1st of July to all those that don't have access to internet so that they can be able to watch them and be a part of what we're doing. Have fun theme days. Rosa and I were talking about this morning to do that and allow people to have National Hot Dog Day, Crazy Sock Day, whatever it is, and let everybody send pictures to each other, video chat each other with what they're doing on that theme day. Make it fun, make it interactive. That's so important. And the last slide in closing, I just wanted to remind everybody in closing that crutches are great when needed as a support, but not so much when they are depended upon forever. So let's shine up our crutches to be the support needed to get over us. Because at the end of the day, isn't that what we want? We want them to be successful on their own, and that's what it takes. So I hope everybody that hasn't jumped on yet to working towards the progress of getting out in the community will make that happen for the people supported. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Gay, thank you so much. Your analogy and your spirit and energy is just infectious. And I know if folks were like us on our team, we've been laughing on mute and really just appreciate that you laid out. This is very doable. It's in places and corners of our communities that you don't always think about things changing. And I think all three of you from the ARC organizations have said and given examples of when we say now is the time. You've described why that is and what's so powerful about, well, this is a challenging time in our world everywhere, that people are all feeling the effect of something we never even imagined before, but you're giving really concrete examples of what is doable. There is a window open right now across the country with regulations, and as you work with Terry and Byron and you talk about what's really enabled people to have better experiences, we're going to see even more shifts in those regulations in the future toward helping people be included, helping them be a part of their community. And we just really appreciate hearing from each of you what that looks like in your corners and necks of the wood in Alabama. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Tina is joining us now from Voc Rehab. Terry, welcome.
Tina.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tina. Thank you. Tina, if you'll join us on camera.
She is.
But she's on mute, I think.
She's muted.
There we go. Can you hear me?
There you are. Great. Thanks, Tina. Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you guys for including me. We've always had a great collaboration with the Department of Mental Health to mutually serve the consumers in Alabama. We've had a lot of success working together.
Wow.
Their partners are our partners, so I'm as familiar with Susan at the ARC, Sarah, and Gay at ARC of Clark County. So thank you so much for having me. I want to tell you a little bit about what ADRS is doing and some of the impact of COVID on our agency as well. I want to cover 4 basic areas: what the staff here is doing to protect the consumers that we serve, how we are serving consumers, the provider agencies, the impact on them and what they're doing in regard to service provision, and then some of the challenges that we have with COVID. I like what some of the other presenters said about these challenges sure make a big window for some innovation, and we're certainly starting to see that. First slide. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing with our staff. We were teleworking, we were never closed, but we were teleworking until June 2nd, when at least in the adult service division, and that's the one I'm going to focus the most on today, we all returned to the offices. Each division director got tasked with deciding how they would best move forward. So early intervention, still doing Zoom meetings with their consumers, and SAIL had to initiate a lot of protocols because they can't do the social distancing for the consumers that they serve. But we did all go back to work June 2nd, and of course are following all the CDC mandates, including wearing masks to work every day, except when we're locked up in our offices like right now. And we get our temperatures checked every day too, to protect consumers that are coming in. Consumers are call us and make appointments for services. We can take applications via the telephone, but some come in for appointments just like they used to. We do and have implemented a survey that we conduct with the consumers that are coming into the building to both keep them safe and keep our staff here safe. Next slide. And we have basically 4 questions that we ask. Have them or anyone in their household been sick or tested positive or showed symptoms of COVID? Have they traveled outside the U.S. in the last 2 weeks? Have they been exposed to the virus that they know of in the past 2 weeks? Or has anyone in the household been tested? So based on their answers to those questions, we'll either move forward or reschedule for an appointment at a later date. We are seeing now more and more applications for services, so we are definitely picking back up. When they come here, we ask that they stay in their car. Most people, if they have access to a cell phone, and most do, and they text us or they call us, and we complete that survey over the phone before they come in. And then they're allowed to bring 1 family member or guardian into the building with them. And then, of course, you know, we wear our masks and conduct that intake interview at that time. Next slide. So in order to better prepare to get the information that I think you're wanting from me in regard to our community rehab partners, we sent out a brief survey to kind of ask them if they're open and providing all services. Are some services virtual? If they're providing limited services, what are they not offering? If they're providing virtual services, when do they anticipate that their staff will be back? And if they're providing employment services and support employment services, are they doing all the job coaching and follow-up, and how are they doing that? And so I was kind of surprised. 32 of the 35 respondents, and just to give you a picture, we have 39 supported employment providers. We have 29 CRPs, but there's a lot of overlap in those numbers. So that basically gives you an idea that almost all of them responded. So out of the 35 that responded, 32 said that they were open and providing all services. Now, one of them since that time, and this was only a few days ago, has since closed because they had a surge in their area and they're anticipating reopening on July 6th. And we had one other service provider that has not been open and is closed until July 6th. 2 said they were doing virtual intakes, but they would do individual employment services. The target date for those that were not providing those one-on-one services for employment to our consumers, the target date for that again is July 6th. And 32, and now 31, since the one that was open closed back, are providing all services to consumers who are wanting to seek employment services in the community. And I'll tell you some interesting things that have come about lately is I talk to the provider agencies a lot, and I talk to our other 2 supported employment specialists a lot. And they all report that that employers are looking for employees, and even those that closed in certain areas, like they either furloughed some employees, they're hiring in other departments. So we are seeing a big tick in employment. One in a college town in Alabama, they are actually they employ 20 consumers of VR in that town in the last couple of days, and are looking to employ many more. And through that relationship with one of our community rehab providers, they are introducing us to a number of big employers in conjoining city, and we expect a lot of opportunities. And this was a kind of, Sarah, it made me think of your Sanho. It was a tier 1 auto manufacturing, so these are really good jobs. So we're very excited about that. And another report I got was, because the colleges are not open this summer, and many are anticipating that the students are not going back to the fall till the fall, there's openings for a lot of positions now that traditionally the students filled. So we are seeing employment opportunities for our consumers in the community. Next slide. So some of the impact that it's had on VR. This was another area that they suggested that I talk to you about. So many, the schools all closed mid-March, and we had a lot of authorized services through mid-March through May. And that's a very, very busy time for us to access the students in the school. And so some of you provider agencies that are on this call, you realize that we had authorized a lot of pre-employment transition services that you guys help us with. And we were not able to do that because we had no access to the students who never returned back to school for the school year. So that impacts us in many ways. We have a mandate to spend 15% of our federal allotment on pre-employment transition services. And we do an excellent job in Alabama of doing that and making sure that we provide services to a large number of students in the state. And because of COVID, we weren't able to access that. So we will not have spent our allotment and we'll have to roll that over. And that impacts the students because they're really strong pre-employment services. It impacts the provider agencies, our partners at DMH, because they provide a lot of those services with us. So that impacted us in many ways. We also have what's called JET, which is a summer work-based learning program. And we partner with employers in the community for those services. For the students, it's often their first attempt at paid employment in the community. So they're excited about it. The business is excited. And again, our partner agencies, that some of which are on this call, they weren't able to do some of that. I think Sarah got to move forward with her summer work program, but many of the providers did not. Some of the employers canceled. Some of the provider agencies weren't open, therefore were not providing services. And some of the students elected not to participate, and some of the parents also elected for the students that they didn't want them to participate for fear of COVID, which we understood. So a lot of those services didn't get to happen, and that was a shame. Also, Project Search, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and both ARC of Madison and ARC of Jackson host Project Searches for us. They were impacted because, again, this happened in mid-March. So a lot of the students or youth were in their third rotation. A lot of the interviews for the next year had not yet occurred. So they didn't have the students selected when schools closed down. We had a couple that were impacted because of the graduation rate, the diploma auction. So they weren't able to move forward next year. So of the 16 project searches that Alabama has conjointly with DMH, we've lost 3 student programs, and we have 2 that are still on the fence right now. We are trying very hard to see what we can do to have those 2 programs next year. So there are a lot of reasons that we lost those programs, but they were greatly impacted by COVID occurring when it did and where they fell in. And I think nationally, as we talk to Project Search, we find that our state is not exclusive to that. They've lost many, many Project Search programs. And when I say lost, they're just in abeyance for a year. We'll pick them up a year from now. So they're kind of just on hold for now. Pre-employment transition services are very likely to change the way they look for next year. We don't know what school's going to look like next year. So we're 2 months out from schools traditionally beginning. And hopefully on the 25th, we'll have more information. But right now, we don't know what school will look like. The superintendent said that probably at least 20% of the student population will be virtual. And you would expect another very high percentage to have a combination of attending school and being virtual. But every district is going to look different. And that impacts us in many ways. One is trying to move forward with services amongst those unknowns and trying to have a virtual platform that we can access students so that we can provide the pre-employment transition services to make them ready for employment down the road. So not knowing what that'll look like, of course, is both scary and challenging. I think we'll have a very strong virtual platform that we're working on right now, but we'll know more as we move forward. A couple of our providers, like I said, only a couple, but they are not open for business. And as we get more and more consumers that are ready to go back to work, and we have employers saying we need employees, we will have to redirect some of those to the service providers that are open, because we can't, wait a month for the other service providers to open. But we certainly understand that some of our consumers and some of our families are not ready to move forward, and we appreciate that. I was asked if a consumer lost his job, was furloughed, or lost his job due to COVID, would we work with them again on employment? And of course, the answer to that is yes, we will. We're happy to provide those services. I guess that's about it, unless you have specific questions of me. I did have a next slide, and that's contact information for me. Mike and Jennifer are supported employment specialists, both in North and South Alabama. Mike has the North, Jennifer has the South, and then Tasha Harrison Betts is our statewide transition specialist. Thank you.
Tina, thank you so much, and we appreciate you also mentioning for those that are transitioning out of the education system that this is a particularly uncertain time, and not knowing what that, especially if they have not really been employed or have not had even day supports to this time. So that's a really unique population that's transitioning out of the school world into adult life. So we appreciate you bringing that up as a part of your information as well. So we're going to switch now to a discussion time with our panelists, but before we do that, I actually wanted to see if Genni and Tom, if you'd like to make any observations from the great stories and examples that have been shared by our other panelists.
Well, first we had to quit crying.
We are so proud of you guys. I mean, just incredible job.
Yeah, we really teared up. And what I guess I heard is what, very interesting, but it's what we say over and over and over, and I guess it's the truth, is that if you get determined, if you embrace with your entire heart that this is the right thing to do, there is nothing, COVID, recession, social unrest, there's nothing that will stop you. But the critical thing is to reach that place, you know, and Gay, you put it so beautifully, there you can throw those crutches away. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be easy. There's not going to be a golden path laid out for you, you know, that you're going to be led down. You're going to have to dig deep, and you're going to have to reevaluate what it is we're really here for. And in my belief, that is really to help people acquire their full civil rights and their place in the community, and to have the community embraced people, so that as it's not all about you, Gay, as you're saying, it's really about helping people find their place in the community and helping the community find their role in embracing and supporting those folks. And so just beyond proud of all of you.
Yeah, it's about leadership, and that's where it begins and ends. You can come up with all kinds of excuses of we're not paid enough, or we can't find opportunities, and this, that, and the other. But like I said, you got to get your staff. You've got to lead your group, and you can overcome anything. We did it in 5 states, working with all kinds of local governments and state governments, and had every obstacle you can imagine. And we did it. And it was because we had a great team. And I think these 3 examples are, you guys have created great teams.
So thank you.
Yes. Proud of you.
Well said. That's wonderful. The relationships that have been formed and the determination that you've all spotlighted today has just absolutely been amazing. So I wanted to invite all of our panelists back to their cameras if they're available, and let's do some questions. And folks out there in Alabama that are listening in, please join with us. You can certainly click on the hand raise if you're able to be unmuted, if that's something that you're interested in, but also take advantage of the chat space as well. We do have one question in the queue from Susan. Thank you, Susan, for being patient. You posted this early on, and I think Tom and Genni, this came up in the beginning of the event today. Have you had experience with asset-based community development? She's saying, guessing that that is community mapping. Did you collaborate with any public entities such as municipalities or county commissions to employ community mapping, or just provider staff?
You know, we've done a little of everything. I think that's, you know, really the bottom line, because we worked in such different communities. Big metropolitan areas like Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, you know, you sort of have certain relationships there, whereas in rural areas, you have entirely different relationships. So, you know, I would say the more smaller, the smaller, the more intimate the community, we would get more involved with government and really all community members, civic associations and different entities, universities, whatever we possibly could in order to see what we could identify. There's a couple of things about community mapping that I think are very critical. First and foremost, if you don't make it somebody's job, it's very difficult to get the numbers of opportunities that you want to have. So it really has to be much as job development. You all job developers out there know, when you get interrupted when you're doing job development, it makes it very hard to carry through. Much attention needs to be paid to community mapping, and that requires someone's focus, and it requires focus to maintain those relationships. They don't just stay forever. You have to pet them and care for them and make sure they're going to stay healthy. And I absolutely agree with folks who said that during this time, if you haven't been reaching out to your community partners, get on it and do that, because you want to maintain that strong relationship and collaborate with them on how are we going to get, you know, back on track here. Don't just assume you know everything, work with them.
Well, and that while you might use everybody around you, your staff, your parents, you know, friends, board members, to identify these places, they have to be vetted and documented. You just can't let direct service people go willy-nilly into the community and do van therapy. That ain't gonna get it. It's got to match their interests and skills, and there's got to be a teaching moment here. Yeah.
I'm seeing some of our panelists grinning. Gay, would you want to also respond? Or Susan and Sarah, you're welcome to also join in as far as how you've perhaps done something similar to community mapping, or maybe some outreach to even the public entities.
I think Gay's muted.
Yeah.
There I am. Well, one thing, you've got to make sure that the people that live in that area are invested in that area. And we weren't doing that several years ago. We were focused in one area. And I know we've gotten really in touch with the city halls, with the Chamber of Commerce, with the police department, all of those areas who are helping us to work out things throughout the community, and are actually have created some things for us within the community because they knew we were interested in doing something. I know we have a community garden that's just to be started with the police department. They're heading it up on our back property, and we're excited about them doing that and being able to provide those kind of services that way.
Right.
We were fortunate enough to have a ex-Department of Mental Health advocate who wanted to volunteer with us from the start, and Genni probably remembers him.
Oh, I do.
He did a lot of our community contacts, got a lot of our volunteer activities going. He arranged all kind of tours of different types of places for employment, really thinking outside the box, like shoe stores, florists. You know, if somebody said they had an interest in animals, he would go to an animal shelter. You know, it really, he was just so creative in what he was doing. So But outside of that, we started listening to people at their meetings and looking at their interest. And from there, we would start, okay, this is, you know, you're really interested in knitting. So, you know, going in doing sit and stitch at Low Mill. You know, we have worked a lot with the chamber. We have chamber ambassadors. They do ribbon cuttings. We have, you know, people who are, we fluff for the veterans, you know, that they put on the graves. There's just so many different activities that we've gotten involved in over time. But word of mouth does a lot of it. In saying, have you looked at the ARC? You know, we take out the United Way, when they do their surveys for what their focus area is, we deliver those out. But we have continued to do a good many of our volunteer activities even during this time, delivering meals to homes, and not just Meals on Wheels, but school lunches. It's just, you know, you have to really, you know, not look at the normal kind of thing. Like I said, who would have thought to go visit a shoe store to go, what is the job here? Somebody wanted us to come to their farm. So we said, not just come to the farm, what are jobs on the farm that you could teach us about? So it's a different mindset and a different way of thinking. But, you know, like I said, it went from that real strategic to every staff member coming going, did you know there's a boat show and they have 3 boats that you can look at outside? You know, everybody's just coming in now just excited with different types of activities. We got, you know, and especially with the outside types of things, you know, scavenger hunts, you know, there's just so many different kind of things that they're coming up with on a daily basis that, you know, I don't even, you know, are outside of what I would think about doing. And so, you know, indoor places like community centers where we could clean it before we go in, you know, this classroom. And then that's where we could do our virtual class. So, you know, I would say get your staff involved and have them be creative as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we have a person who is our community person, and she has worked really hard to develop the volunteer sites. And then our supported employment services have shared experiences and things that are happening that might complement the community part. So we've shared a lot like that. And then the more people, the more of our staff who have gone out, they've just, like the other programs have said, they've become enthusiastic. And I have been really surprised with some staff that I thought we might lose, but instead they're just like gung-ho. It's been really gratifying to see how much they've enjoyed the change, as well as the people we support, you know. That's been a really good experience. We do a lot of things as well with our community, and so I think we've got a good foundation. And Genni was a really big part of helping us form that foundation. I always say when I talk about her, she's the most inspirational person I've ever met. She can inspire you to change.
She changed me.
I'm telling you. And of course, working with VR too, Tina and Byron, you get all the support you need from them to, you know, once you have a task, they give you all the support you need. That helps tremendously.
Yeah.
What a wonderful testament to all of the time that you've invested throughout your state. It's really wonderful. I know it really brings a smile to everyone's face to hear about the successes, because every day we know we're going to be met with challenges, and being able to have some of these stories and examples there for us to pull from on those moments where you just really need extra inspiration and a little kick in the pants sometimes. And I think none of us are ever going to look at crutches in the same way, Gay. So thank you for doing that. There's another part of Susan's question from early on, and I'm curious to ask this of you all to see if you've had experience. She's asking about developing family or individual run sharing or mentoring groups, and how that might have been a factor in the peer-to-peer support or the family-to-family support.
I can share one thing quickly, and I'd really rather hear from others. But one thing that we did early on when we were moving into the community, and that we realized we were going to have some resistance from, some families who were uncertain, we solicited some family members who had sons or daughters who were being very successful, either in employment or in their community engagement, and they agreed to be references, or someone that a family that was having some reluctance could reach out and speak directly to. And I think that was enormously helpful. We stepped out of that picture. It was just family to family. And that was quite helpful. With regard to individuals, we encouraged someone who perhaps had gotten a job to come back. This was why we still have facilities, to come back and speak to their peers about their experience, and having that peer talk about what they were doing. And, I got to buy these things, and I got to go these places, and I got to meet these people. I really got other people excited. So I'm a great supporter of the notion of mentorship and those kinds of approaches.
Well, it's celebrating success in every way you can creatively think about it, of newsletters, emails, bringing people together, Zoom, just celebrating all your successes and telling everybody how it's working. Even board members. I mean, you'll get board members who aren't happy about shutting down the workshop, and but when they see how lives have been dramatically changed, I had that several times with board members, and made a big difference.
Made a big difference with you.
Made a big difference with me. Yeah, I didn't want to shut stuff down. I was buying multi-million-dollar buildings. I didn't want to do it. And Genni took me out and showed me the lives of people who I helped deinstitutionalize, who were, had behavior problems, couldn't communicate, and suddenly they've got a full-time job with friends and making money and making choices. And I didn't recognize these people. Changed me.
I think our town hall meeting helped a lot. We showed successes there. We had volunteer places come in and speak to how the people were so valuable to their nonprofits. We had people talk about work. One of the things that I was really worried about when we were looking at closing down our workshop was that families would be upset. In the end, we didn't have but one complaint. And it was just amazing. And the board, they didn't even come to the board. They just mentioned it as staff, and it was in my basic assurance plan. But, you look at that and go, in the end, we were able to repurpose and find different lives for everybody, to the point to where it wasn't we didn't go out and say we're closing our workshop. Yeah. We just started a transition and a groundswell. And in the end, everybody was satisfied. And so, it's just, when you think that, that was 70 something individuals, and like I said, the average age 50 to 55, and you're able to do that, that was really empowering, I think, to the program in itself.
I think just can't reemphasize that this is the moment. If you let people come back to the building, then you've got to figure out a way how to get people out of the building. This is the minute. You've got to be doing, profiles on people and what they want, and community mapping. If you've got, if opening is scheduled for August 1, you've got a month and a half to run and get it done, and start thinking about how people are going to be in the community and not coming back.
And I've started engaging my staff already and picking people up. What is this going to look like? How is this going to feel? If you wait till August 1st, or, even it's not going to work. You've got to go ahead and do a trial run. And so we've been doing a trial run all month, working with families that need, we're not getting paid for it, families that need support. This is how it starts. This is how your day's going to look. Are we able to do all the choices that everybody wants like we used to? Maybe not, because we can't go in certain places, but it looks a little bit different. But at least we've got a jump start, and we're trying to do something right now.
Yeah,
Yeah, great.
you're all fabulous.
I think we're serving about 40 people one-on-one in the community right now, or if they've got a brother or sister, two-on-one. And then I've got over 20 people in small group employment, and then the other people in employment at this time. So we are really got a good jump start on starting services next month.
Great.
Tina, any other comments from Voc Rehab? I know you've been listening to the examples and responses from our friends at the ARCs. Anything else from Voc Rehab for us this afternoon?
No, I mean, I'm very proud to be working with the folks there. The panel is superb, and I enjoy working with them every day, and anything that we can do to support your shift, we're on board.
I know that, Tina.
Great.
We've got a meeting tomorrow. You know, I will say we are fortunate in Alabama that we have so many supportive people and so much innovation going on. You just got to look for it. You know, you just got to reach for it. You know, and those programs that are staying stagnant right now, I really thought I was going to lose a ton of money going this way. But, you know, what I found out is, you know, I'm doing pretty much okay doing new services, but you just got to take that jump.
Terry, how about from the division? Any other comments, closing comments that you might want to share to us today? And Byron, I know you're being real shy, which you're not usually, but any closing comments from the division would be great.
I'm just happy to see the energy from our panelists, and there's always opportunity. You just gotta look for it and take advantage. I appreciate what was said. You know, out of, what's the saying, out of dust, something. I'm not good at those kinds of things, but anyway, you know what I'm talking about. We have to make the best with what we have, and we have there is an opportunity now for us to take full advantage of, and really, I go back, I work with Gay, and I just have to say, and I've shared this story many times, if you really listen to people, it's all about that listening. Our last big meeting at Clark County, when I was there, I walked away and I'm thinking, even after all these years, over 20 something years, we're still not listening to people. And I hope if anything positive comes out of this COVID experience, we've learned, you know, by changes in behavior, changes in attitudes, and everything, that there's a different way of listening to people that can identify what they truly desire and what their support needs are. Absolutely, you know, having higher expectations, and for those that we serve, I appreciate the story, the analogy of the crutches, because you're so right. We often do that, and we do it without thinking, and it's not intentional by no means. But it is so important to look at things differently and throw away those crutches. It's a new day and new opportunity, and again, I appreciate this workshop and everybody's comments, and offer our support any way we can. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll be sharing the recording link for anyone that wasn't able to join, so we'll make sure that that, as well as the presentation materials from our great set of panelists today, are available, and be watching for updates from Byron and the team there. They're never shy about getting in touch with us and sharing their great questions, and also being example. I just want to put a little plug in for a moment. Alabama is one of 26 states right now in the State Employment Leadership Network, and they really are one of the states that I I enjoy putting a spotlight on as regularly as we can. You have so much going on there, and you have a lot to brag about. We face challenges every day in this field, not just from the shifting universe around us, but knowing that when you're in human services, nothing's a given. But there's constant opportunity, and for us to be able to help bring your story to other states around the country is really an honor. So thanks for inviting us to be a part of this with you today, and for being a shining light for everybody. That's really been a fantastic use of time this afternoon, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks everyone, take care, and we will hope to talk with you all soon.